first. Thank you so much. So how do you know Scott? We got to start there. So,
Oh, geez. We go back to 1990s, I'd probably say. Well, probably, yeah, early 90s. Scott was, oh gosh, Scott was running SIA at the time. And SIA was a small little solar energy group that was, everybody was combined together. It was one big happy family that we had on Capitol Hill on Capitol Street, I remember, right?
uh-huh.
And we had AWEA and SIA, and the hydro people were there, the biomass people were there, the geothermal people were there. So it was like this one big little happy family there.
Renewables
And what's that?
and renewables all the way, right?
Yeah, it was sort of like everything. I think anything was the only thing that wasn't allowed was hydro because they, it's one of those things that
Nobody
it's
liked
not
the
gonna
hydro
work.
guys.
Yeah, I know it's they got some good potential, but they cause some challenges with the streams and stuff like that and the fishes. So that's always but there is pumped hydro, which is a little bit different.
Yep.
Another
Although that's
method
the
of
way
storage.
that the one of the largest environmental organizations in the country got started was stopping the pumped hydro in the Hudson
Right.
Valley.
Yeah, and it's still like one of the biggest. I'd say it's one of the biggest forms of energy storage still today. But as our lithium comes on board, I think we'll see a really big change in that world. We'll see things really evolve there a lot. So, but
Correct.
yeah, Scott and I, we got together back then. Things kind of grew and then blew up a little bit in the late 90s or early 2000s or something like that. I can't remember when it was, but everybody kind of went their own way. And now there's even talk I've heard that even AWEA and SIA are talking about coming back together again. So
Wow.
it'll be another happy family again.
That'll be great. That'll be
Yeah, so now
great.
we're on the other side of the world. That was the side of the world. Back then we were just kind of all babies trying to figure this stuff out. Scott had already been on the Hill for, I think he moved up there in the 72, 73 or something like that. So he had already been doing this for a long time. But then he left Javits' office. He thought, there's some bigger opportunities out there that he wanted to pursue. So, and from that, SIA was born.
Yeah, it's amazing. So first, just to be so I'm respectful of your time. What's your stop?
So I've got, I think at 10:15, so I get 45 minutes. Is that
Okay,
going to
great.
work
10:15
okay?
is good. Okay, good. Just wanted to double
Okay.
check because I didn't want to. I
It's
wanted to
been a
let you have
busy
some
day.
fun.
I started this morning with Thailand and doing a presentation at 4 a.m. with a bunch of companies in Thailand. And then where did I end up? And then in Germany and then the US this morning. And so, yeah.
So I'll do your bio separately later, so I don't cut into your time. So why don't you just tell us
Okay.
a little bit about your career, Andy, and all the things you've been involved with,
Oh my gosh.
and also, if you would, what you're doing now. Yeah, in a very short, concise kind of way. But
Yeah, how do I do that? So, I started in the mid 1980s in renewables, living off the grid on a cattle ranch. That's where we kind of got the idea. My business partners at the time and I developing small scale wind turbines, making them out of Ford alternators. And it's really got where I started. And there's of course, a huge chapters in between all of that. And fast forward today, I guess you could say even back then I had this dream, this philosophy, this feeling that one day we're going to start seeing really more and more distributed energy applications, things connected to the grid with conventional homes and businesses using renewables and storage always was a factor. Fast forward to today, so I now am involved with Underwriter Laboratory, which is, you've heard them. They're a 125-year-old company focused on certification standards, probably the premier in the world. They saw the opportunity in the distributed energy sector and wanted to continue to move and invest in areas that are just outside of certification. And that's kind of where we come in. And really what we do through Homer, and that's the software platform that we are involved with. Homer really optimizes all those technologies. So it might be solar and storage and wind and geothermal even, fuel cells, and of course the grid, and really looking for the most viable combination of technologies based on a particular location, what the solar resource and wind resource is. So really my career hasn't really changed a whole lot. Certainly the market has evolved. and I'm so excited to be here and to see us take part in this huge evolution of the grid.
Yeah, pretty awesome, right? It's like
Yeah.
amazing how things are blowing up now. Just
Oh, it's
fantastic. So,
crazy. Yeah.
so just so people get to know you a little bit, can you tell us one personal thing about you that most people wouldn't know?
Oh, wow. So yeah, I used to ride horses for a living and uh, worked on a cattle ranch. And I used to, that's kind of my start. My closest neighbor was 7 miles away, and it was a real different world. I didn't start in the maybe in the Grass Valley world of, I started in the cattle world. So yeah.
Wow, and it was in the cattle world that you got your idea to start up this small
Yeah.
wind power
Exactly,
company.
Southwest Windpower. Exactly right. So we had these old giant one-cylinder, 36-inch stroke, witty diesel generators, and just got tired of rebuilding those things and paying for the fuel and recognizing that there's got to be a better way than this. At that time, solar panels. I bought my first 30-watt Arco solar panel, $11.50 a watt. I still remember that. Thank goodness there was a rebate. Thank you, Jimmy Carter, on that one. And I just thought, no, there's just got to be more. 30 watts. What am I going to do with that? And so we started playing around with the alternators. I was working at a different company. Also, my full-time job then was working at a company called W. Gore-Tex. There, I met a business partner, David Callie. We then had this idea. He was also happened to be coincidentally living off the grid, coincidentally also designing wind generators. So we got together and started Southern Windpower.
And
And
Southwest Wind Power was pretty big, pretty good in the industry for a
huge.
long time, right?
Long time. I mean, we sold 175,000 small wind turbines around the world, 130 countries, 140 countries we were into. Um, Amazing technology, great business. We really evolved a lot of different technologies, the air, SkyStream, it was all great. But, sometimes, and this goes back to what I do today, it's about economics. And although we felt we had some really great technology, it's just as solar went from $12, 11.50, $12 a watt to where it is today, what, 40 cents, 30 cents a watt. Yeah, we just couldn't keep up with that. So eventually, I think I left the company in 2012, and then it finally died in 2014. Just couldn't compete with the emerging technologies, and it's the way it works. It's quite all right because we drove of an industry which has really it's amazing what's going on today.
So basically, what you're saying is that you guys were there, you were doing well, you were selling product, you were building your base, and then other competitors came in and they just basically blew you out on price, and that's what happened.
Really more on the and only on the solar side, right? Because at the end of the day, what are we doing? We're producing electrons for a particular application. We whether we just happen to use the wind and solar use the solar. When it comes to other wind turbines, the closest comparisons we had were Chinese knockoffs that were trying to keep up with us, but that really didn't bother us too much. It was really 2010, 2011 when we started seeing this big goal that we talked about in the 90s, which was dollar a watt. That was a big number. And I thought to myself, even 2008, I could see the writing on the wall a little bit that was going on. Just, we're building big ingot factories because prior to that, solar panels were largely produced from just recycled or reject silicon wafers from the computer industry. It was that moment when all of a sudden we had these billion-dollar factories building silicon wafers for solar. Then the prices, everything started changing. The whole world changed, and of course, a lot of companies went bankrupt at the same time. In the solar world too, just trying to keep up with what was going on, the evolution of this exciting market.
Wow, pretty incredible.
It is.
So, do you think there's one unique tool, tip, or tactic that most people need to know, but probably don't?
About the so the one thing I always tell people about the evolution of this market, or really pretty much anything, it's always more complicated than it seems. This market, it's like I remember in the late '90s, a friend of mine that I haven't seen him in a long time, but Steve Johnson from Trace, and we were sitting there talking about his next generation inverters, and he was showing me the first grid tied inverter. It was just a big breadboard at the time, at in the out in the R&D facility. And we were talking about that, the grid connected market, where that is, because really at that time it was really just off grid. It was a bunch of us, survivalists and hippies and people who just didn't want the government to know who we were, using solar. But we saw a bigger picture, and it was the grid connected world. But I look at that, and it wasn't just that, because you got the inverter good, great, and then there was certification. Well, there wasn't a certification standard, so the utilities were like, well, we have to do this and this and this. And, that time you basically had to have an interconnection standard equal to a 300 megawatt power plant, and it was crazy. So and then there was a permitting, and then there was, oh, what about the racking? How do you mount these things? So, we sat there probably smoking something we shouldn't have, and enjoying the moment, and thinking about, well, what's next and where's this going to evolve. And then you realize that, wow, you just don't jump in those markets. You really got to plan ahead and really look for those things that's going to slow you down, and try to plan for those as well.
Great, thanks. So, if you would tell us your worst clean energy moment, share.
Wow, that was probably kind of tied to the survival of the company, and this is a fascinating area too, because and we'll there's a friend of mine that wrote a book about it's called the Windpower story, and Brandon Owens will probably maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later, but and it was a lot about the survival of the industry and how many times it went up and down, and I can look at that myself, and there was a moment in probably the worst moments in 1998, early 1999. The gas company had just come by to turn off the gas for the building. We're building winter, was just trying to survive, and then the EPS came up. We've managed to get them paid off with a credit card, and then comes the EPS doing the same, the utility. It was probably one of those bleak moments we just thought, wow, are we going to make this work? And it was really tough. It was, we were gambling as we always have, and invest in everything we can in tooling and processes to try to improve the products and streamline manufacturing, not necessarily paying attention to the day-to-day as much as we wanted to. And it was a really tough spot. What saved us, it's crazy. What saved us, and it wasn't any intention of our side, but Y2K came along. People thought the world was come to an end. All of a sudden, we had tons of orders, and another colleague of mine from a long time ago, Corey Vaughn, he was a BP Solar at the time. He's like, I need 500 of your wind turbines. I'm like, what? How am I going to do this? So literally within about 90-day period, we went from the lowest point of our time to, a big high, because people thought the world was kind of coming to an end at that time. So it was pretty exciting, but it was also one of those roller coasters, which we all have those in a lot of our beginning of our companies.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and the solar industry is the same way, right? Solar roller coaster is what they call it. So,
yes. That's true too. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what would you say you learned from that experience?
Well, planning a little bit further ahead, cash flow, business sense, that was probably, really trying to plan a little bit ahead, but then, starting to put out, bringing on more people that could really look at the details, what it takes to get the product on the ground into the customer's hand, how you service those customers. Really, that was probably the big thing that we learned, was really, how do we go from, and there's a lot of great books out there, the Crossing the Chasm or something. I think that's one of them. It's moving from that entrepreneur, and still an entrepreneur when you evolve it, but really looking at systems and processes, how you build a business, how you look at warranty rates and cash flow and drawings and specifications. We moved away from napkins to computers, so that was probably the biggest thing, was building that business in a really unique way, that suited for profitability.
Great. Could you tell us, was there a particular moment where you had some incredible, aha, I've got it, and what that was like and where it took you? And...
Wow, there's a bunch of those. You know, I'm trying to think what was the one of those, I think there was a moment in 2007, 2008 when we had launched our new product SkyStream. It had a lot of software bugs in the beginning, trying to figure it out. But all of a sudden, and this is tied to, so there's a couple ways that ahas come together, right? There's your philosophical one about business and thoughts, and but there's also just the business itself. And in the business side, the aha moment was really just we had everything working and things were streamlined and we had the processes going, the software was working. And it was just this moment when all of a sudden people realized that, hey, this is, despite one of the biggest economic downturns in the history of the planet, not to mention this one, but it was all of a sudden the market, the people started to say, I want this. I want energy for my house. I want to reduce my electric bill. I want to have the right to be able to produce my own energy. And we'd always had that in the off-grid market, but we were a different breed of people. This is mom and pop in downtown, whatever, or in rural America, Texas or Louisiana, wanting these systems to produce energy for themselves. And that was that aha moment that I realized that this is going to be really big, on-site generation in people's homes, and it's going to change the world. And this technology is getting there, but we're slowly getting there.
Great. Thank you so much. So we're going to enter what we call the pulsar round. There's other people call it the lightning round, but in this
lightning round, lightning
round. But in awesome Earth kind, which is the power of the air, water, earth, and sun, by the way, coming together with the fifth element, which is you and me and all humanity, which is Earth kind, right? So short, succinct, amazing, mind-blowing answers. You ready?
Yeah. Okay.
All right, here we go. Best advice you've ever received.
Best advice is always be learning. Always be reading, always be understanding, and then everything you read, think in a three-dimensional way, which means that look at that thought, that idea, and then look at it from different angles. Love that, and it really helps me even today.
Excellent, outstanding. Actually, the former chair of the Public Service Commission, Audrey Zibelman, who then decided to leave New York and went as far from it as she could when a certain election happened on the national level, who's now down in Australia doing amazing things. But she said the same thing, actually. When she was in law school, she said she had a professor who said, if you look at the Constitution through one lens, you get this one. But if you look at it from this way, you get this answer. And it all depends on your perspective. So always try to look at, as you say, three-dimensional perspective.
Yeah, she's a wonderful lady too. We had her speak at one of our conferences a few years ago.
Yeah, she's really brilliant. She was reforming the energy vision, or REV in New York was one of her founding pieces. So interesting concept, right? All right, Chair. What are your personal habits that contributes to your success?
It was a hard lesson, but I would say writing down everything. I write down everything. I have notebooks, and I constantly, I don't trust my brain. It's I've got one of those ADHD brains that overthinks sometimes. And so I slow it down by writing it down. And I use that also in my learning process. When I learn something new, I write it down because that helps me retain it that more.
Yeah, they say there's something special about writing that just does something in the brains in terms of making it stick, where it doesn't stick as well as if you don't. So interesting. Totally. So write it all down, huh?
Yeah. So I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that I've done, and so I've got constant. I'm not sure what's around here somewhere, but I just I fill up books and I continue to, and it's also easy to just go back and go, oh yeah, you put the date down in the upper right corner, and then you go. Yeah, that's right. I said that, or I remember saying something, and I go back to that date or around that time, and sure enough, there it is. So it's so helpful.
Yeah, fantastic. You ever go back and find something and like, oh my gosh, I forgot all about that. I remember that was a brilliant idea. Why didn't I do something?
Right. What happened exactly? Yeah.
All right. What would be an internet resource you would recommend people check out?
Wow. So God, there's so much good stuff out there. My world today is microgrids and what we call DER, distributed energy resource. Of course, that's a solar panel on a roof. Microgrids is when you take that solar panel, put some batteries in there, maybe have a small generator if you need that. Hopefully not. And if the grid goes down, you produce power. So that's the microgrid, right? It produces energy for an indefinite period of time, even if whether the grid is there or not. And hopefully, as our technology evolves, more economically. So I really I'm excited about where microgrids/DER is going in our world. That's also what I call on-site generation. And so microgrid knowledge is they're just a small little organization. They're growing. They've got just a vast array of information out there about the evolving microgrid market. So microgrid knowledge is just a really great site for me.
Awesome, fantastic. And it's kind of funny because at one point somebody enlightened me that, oh, your car is a microgrid because it produces energy and it creates electricity and you're doing all that power stuff inside your car. Same with an airplane, actually, or any moving transportation vehicle. It's a little microgrid unto itself. So, yeah, interesting concept though, right?
No, it totally is, and I really see in the near future, not to get too far off on the track, but on the microwave space, we could potentially see the end of blackouts. We could see this point in time which our world will your home will always have a battery in there. It'll have a solar panel on the roof. It might have a little natural gas generator in the backyard. I don't know. Hopefully not again. But producing energy for an indefinite period of time, whether the grid is there or not. So the grid goes down, you don't even know it. And your house is sitting there thinking about, what do I do? Okay, I don't have power from the grid, so let's turn off the ice, the defroster, and let's delay the laundry for a while. It'll think about what to do in order to make sure that you provide power for whatever else you need it for.
Yeah, which is really incredible. And then when you add in the electrification of the transportation system, and now one of the shows that we're going to do is specifically on electric vehicles, cars in particular. Nissan, now has a car, the Leaf, which is actually able to provide power both ways. So you put in a little inverter in the place, and now you can run your whole house off of your car for like 3 days. The average house. So that's kind of amazing, right?
And we have to have a feature in our new software, HOMER Grid. That does just that too. It's really looking at, you can model the car, you can and then you can also model the charging stations and decide, well, how much storage should I have in the event that there is an outage and I need some backup, or how do I avoid demand charges? So you run the model. It tells you how big your battery should be based on an assumed load profile that you've got. So so this is when you look at the buildings of the future, and not far future, I'm talking about 3 to 4 years, because batteries are dropping in cost so rapidly. We watched it took 25, 30 years for solar to get down there. It's going to take another 3 or 4 years, and lithium is going to be there. So it's happening really fast. We're going to see some exciting changes coming up.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And when you look at utility scale solar with utility scale storage, and you see prices in California are now like 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour was the last bid. It was amazing, just how the prices are coming down and just being the most affordable option out there, which is fantastic.
Oh, totally, absolutely is. Yeah.
So, what book would you recommend to the average American, and why?
In what way?
Yeah, just, so people are like, they want to do something about energy. They want to reduce their carbon footprint. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to do it. They need some either inspiration or guidance. Any particular book that comes to mind that you think would be good?
I'm not thinking from that perspective. There's a book that I really like, and I mentioned it briefly a few minutes ago, The Windpower Story. It's a little bit expensive. Wiley has published it. And it's just an amazing book, because it really, it's a history about wind power, but it's way more than that. It's a history of renewable energy in a way that I've never read before. Brandon Owens, he was at GE. I think he's still at GE. He wrote this book. The fascinating thing, just a quick brief thing on it, is it really gets into Rachel Carson's Silent Scream. I think it's Silent Spring. Yes.
Silent Spring, yeah.
And it really shows this connection about how we really lost it in the 50s and 60s in massive project development without any concern about environmental impacts of things, and how wind was always this kind of cool area because solar at that time, I mean, come on, it's probably $40 a watt, and so really it was all there was at that time. And how many times that wind died, and it wasn't for the oil embargoes in the early 70s that really kind of spurred the first movement of distributed or of wind, and of course all through that is where solar came in, because as solar got to at least a semi-practical stage at $12 a watt, that took off. But how many times our industry would have died? How many times that the big guys, the coal industry and others really wanted to die? And it wasn't for really that evolution, that early 70s to mid 70s with PERPA and Jimmy Carter saying, no, I think this solar stuff there's an opportunity here. And so it's just an amazing book. It's just so well written about, and it goes way back to the really old wind turbines 1,000 years ago. But then fast forwarded to the most exciting area. And for me, I guess it was interesting because so many of the players that are in the book, I know them personally. And it was just fun to read that and see how we have just transformed the planet. I mean, in a way that, and back then it was with just a bunch of people that had dreams, because there was no big company out there that was really willing to make the big investments that renewables needed. So it's a fun read, but like I said, it's a little bit pricey, but it's well worth the investment, and I highly recommend it.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Andy, if you were to have a magic wand and you could wave it and change one thing for everybody in the world, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's so many problems we're dealing with right now, huh? I can say COVID right now, but I think that's that's a COVID is a moment in history, right? It's going to come and it's going to go, like we've seen other. And I don't mean the way that the our leader, well, somebody's leader, says. It's I think in the bigger picture, it's education. That everybody, if I had a magic wand, I would say that everybody had an equal access to education, and really science-based education, because if everybody had the knowledge that much of the Western world, and not all of it, but much of it has, wow, we would transform our world in such a different way, and really look at the world in a profound way of how we can make it better and not take advantage of it. So I think just that equal access to science-based education would be so important to me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Science-based education. What a novel concept.
Yeah, probably haven't had that one before, huh?
Who
Into
would want
capitalism,
that?
there's so many
Who
different
would
things that you
want
can think
that?
of.
Who would
I
want
know,
science? I
right?
mean, come
I
on.
know, I know.
I mean, it's not like science is like, it's the cell phones, it's the electricity, it's everything that we have is based on science and engineering.
Yeah.
For
And there's
God's
so many
sakes.
smart people out there that are just, this guy, in Africa, I can't remember his name. Several years ago, he just made a wind generator of junk, and they wrote a book, and it turned into a just amazing story. It's just some guy, just trying to figure out himself. And if he even had the basic knowledge in the beginning, well, he probably would have built it a lot quicker. But it's people like that stop and say, let me think about this. How do I solve this? And if you have that knowledge, or at least you have the connection to be able to do that. Of course, that's one of the dreams of the Google, right? Of Google is how do you deliver as much knowledge as possible. But the hard thing nowadays is how do you filter through the garbage in order to get to the good stuff. So that's another chapter we'll have to figure out.
Yeah, so the real truth versus the fake truth, eh?
Right. There's a little bit of that, unfortunately, out there.
Yeah.
No, wind turbines do not cause cancer. Yeah. It's just, yeah. Okay.
Well, you get those wind turbines, they're going to slow down
Yeah.
the
Slow down
Earth's
the wind in the
rotation,
world.
man. That's
I
it.
know.
That's it. We're
It's
done.
like,
All right,
yeah,
so
hit
this
me with
is
the hammer.
into the next level of the story. So this
Yeah.
is one of my most fun parts. So it's
Yes.
WTF or F, weather time fun or weather time fudge. So something you did that was fun during the weather and what kind of season it was, or weather time fudge. It was an extreme weather event. And what was that like for you? And tell us what came out of it. Take your pick, Andy. WTF or F?
WTF. Yes. A good friend of mine, gosh, from NREL. Yes, that was one of his favorite phrases. So, yes, I just lost his mind. I lost his name at the moment, but yes, I like that.
So, okay, tell us a story about whichever one you choose. So,
Oh,
fudge or fun?
well, we would use that phrase a little bit differently.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I know, and that's what mostly strikes people. But yes, if it's weather time fudge or weather time fun. So, some extreme weather event that you went through that was like, oh my goodness, how I lived through that, or something that you
yeah,
did that was really fun and what kind of weather it was.
yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the ones. So hang on. Oh, there was this crazy time. It was one of those extreme weather events, and it was actually I was in a resort in the Maldive Islands. And if you don't know the Maldives, it's a little island chain south and west of India. They're made of atolls. There's 1,200 islands, about 600, I think now they're down to about 400 of them are occupied. The highest elevation in the Maldives is 1 foot, right? And and it's close to the equator, so typically they don't have really tidal wave. They don't have tidal changes like you might see in the away from the equator. And I was there, and I was in a resort waiting for another meeting. And I wouldn't call it a resort. It's like this cheesy hotel in the city of Mali. Mali is about 60 acres of just nothing but houses stuck on an island. I mean, it really, it's so funny looking at it from a distance because there's no unused land, right? But so I'm there and I'm sitting there eating my fish curry, like that's what you have for breakfast. And all of a sudden this squall came through, and I've never seen like it before. And the trees are rattling, and everything was just people, it was just out of nowhere. And the tables and like I said, the motorcycles are falling over. The people were just screaming and running different places, and we're just like, I don't know, what do I do here? So I just walked in and I said, well, what's the protocol here? And he says, it'll be over within about 20, 30 minutes. And I was like, this is normal? Yeah, this happens from time to time. And so yeah, it was quite an event because I'm just sitting there just like freaking out what's going to happen next. And that was just after I was there about a year and a half after a large a big earthquake they had in Indonesia, and it created this flood or this tidal wave that just rolled over the whole island or the whole country. And they had just put everything back together again, so they were a little bit nervous about what was going on out there.
Yeah, with good reason. Oh my gosh, especially with all the extreme weather events happen these days, right? So,
Oh yeah, yeah.
oh my
It's
gosh,
getting worse.
yeah.
Yeah, they're yeah. So
Okay,
yes.
great. All right. So, what's the one thing that you're most energized about today?
Wow, that would be back to microgrids. I think it's the evolution of the home. We're going to see systems in homes that is the end of blackouts. It's energy independence in a way that we haven't seen before. It's not going to be easy. Right now a lot of utilities embrace some of this stuff, but you're starting to see the cracks in the relationship, because these technologies will completely redefine how we see the power grid. Um, there's a book or a document we wrote several years ago at Homer. Um, um, It'll come to me in a minute. But it's really about, it's called The Economics of Grid Defection. And it was done with a few people. Rocky Mountain Institute was the prime on that article. But it's really talking about this movement away where homes and businesses, this power systems will be the product of the future. Will be built. These systems will be built into homes of the future. So I'm very excited about that, and it's all about storage. That's coming very fast, and by 2030, this is going to be a standard product in people's homes.
Fantastic. So we're running down to the end of our time. We got a couple of minutes left, and in
Yep.
this parting little period of time, what would be your parting piece of guidance and advice? And do you want people to contact you? If so, how do we get a hold of you?
Oh, sure. When it comes to some parting advice, never stop learning. Really important. Just always remember, that this is a world that's evolving so fast. So keep reading, keep going there. Write everything down. As I said it earlier, just have that journal. Just remember that. Make that sort of your cookbook, if you will, of ideas and stuff like that. Um, Always be networking. I've got this huge connection, and a lot of it came from many years ago, but never stop connecting. It's more difficult today's world. There are things like LinkedIn. Just don't click on everybody thinking that's going to make your network. Really develop the relationship, who they are, what they do, how do you benefit from them, and how do you help them out as well. Create that network. Um, you know, and one thing that's even more important to me is really looking at slightly from business, and it's really more philosophical, but it's absolutely true. And recognize that there's only one race out in the world, and that's the human race, and that we are all in this together, whether we're regardless of our skin color, our religion, or our background. We have this one planet. We're all one people, and let's work together and make this place a better place to live.
Perfect ending for Earth kind energy. Thank you, Andy. Do you want people to get a hold of you? And if so, how to get
Sure.
you?
So, a couple of ways you can get me on LinkedIn, Andy, and Kruse, Cruz. You'll see me out there at UL, on the UL thing. And on my email address is andy.cruz@ul.com.
Awesome.